The world can change in a heartbeat. For Sarah Miller, that heartbeat was barely the size of a raindrop. It was fragile, uncertain, and almost silent, yet it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. She sat in the sterile hospital room, clutching the thin blanket that covered her belly, her hands trembling. Around her, monitors beeped in rhythmic patterns that felt like whispers of both hope and fear. At just 21 weeks pregnant, she had gone into sudden labor. The doctors told her the truth she didn't want to hear, that the baby was far too small to survive. But Sarah wasn't ready to give up. Not yet, not after everything she'd already lost. Her husband, David, stood beside her, his eyes red from sleepless nights. They had tried for years to have a baby. 2 miscarriages, endless doctor visits, and prayers that went unanswered, until this pregnancy. Every kick, every sonogram, every heartbeat had been a miracle. And now, as her contractions grew stronger, she feared that miracle was slipping away. "Please," she whispered to the doctor through tears. "Please save my baby." Dr. Lopez, a woman known for her calm voice and steady hands, knelt beside the bed. "We're going to do everything we can," she said softly. "But Sarah, you need to understand, if he's born now, he'll be smaller than my hand. His lungs, they aren't ready." Sarah nodded, but her heart refused to listen. Somewhere deep inside, she felt it, her son wanted to live. The delivery room filled with quiet chaos. Nurses moved quickly, preparing tiny instruments, special incubators, and micro-sized medical gear. The air was thick with tension. Every second mattered. And then it happened. A faint cry, so soft it was almost like a whisper, broke through the beeping monitors. Everyone froze. The baby, impossibly small, barely 10 ounces, was breathing. The world's smallest baby had just been born. Sarah couldn't even see him clearly at first. He was translucent, fragile like glass. His skin shimmered faintly under the light, and his fingers were thinner than a thread. A nurse gasped softly, tears filling her eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He's fighting." They named him Eli. The doctors placed Eli into a clear incubator, connecting tubes thinner than wires to his tiny body. His chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate breaths. Every breath was a battle. Every second, a victory. For days, Sarah and David sat beside the NICU window, unable to hold their son, only allowed to watch. Their lives revolved around that tiny box of light, that fragile miracle. Other babies came and went, but Eli stayed, hanging on, defying every prediction. The nurses began calling him the little warrior. One night, as Sarah sat quietly humming a lullaby near the incubator drive, Lopez entered the room with a somber look. "Sarah," she said carefully, "there's something you need to know. We ran some tests. The way Eli survived, it's unusual." Sarah frowned, confused. "Unusual how?" "Doctor." Lopez hesitated. "His body is functioning differently than any preemie we've ever seen. His lungs are developing outside the usual pattern, almost like he adapted himself. It's as if he knew he had to change in order to live." Sarah blinked, unable to comprehend. "You mean, he's evolving?" The doctor smiled faintly. "You could say that. His DNA shows markers we've never recorded in a premature infant. It's like his body refused to give up." The news spread quietly through the hospital. Scientists wanted to study him, but drive. Lopez and the parents refused. "He's not an experiment," David said firmly. "He's our son." Weeks passed, and Eli grew stronger. Every gram of weight gained was celebrated like a birthday. Every stable heartbeat was a gift. Nurses left little notes beside his incubator. "You can do it, Eli. Keep fighting, little man. You're our miracle." But even miracles are fragile. One night, during a storm that shook the hospital windows, Eli's monitors began to scream. His oxygen dropped dangerously low. Doctors and nurses rushed in. Sarah and David stood frozen in the hallway, praying harder than they ever had before. "Doctor." Lopez barked orders, her hands moving with lightning speed. "Increase pressure. Prepare the emergency ventilator." Minutes passed like hours. Then silence. Sarah's legs gave out. David caught her before she hit the floor. And then, a sound. Not a cry, not a wail, but a soft, steady breath. Eli's oxygen levels began to rise on their own. "Doctor." Lopez stared at the monitor in disbelief. "He's stabilizing, by himself." The entire room fell silent as they watched the numbers climb. It was as if Eli had found the strength to breathe on his own, against every possible medical law. When Sarah was finally allowed back in the room, she pressed her hand against the glass of the incubator. "You did it, baby," she whispered. "You saved yourself." From that day on, things began to change, not just for Eli, but for everyone who met him. Doctors from across the country visited to learn from his case. Parents with premature babies found hope in his story. The media called him the miracle baby. But for Sarah and David, he wasn't a symbol. He was their son, a living reminder that faith, love, and determination can rewrite the rules of life itself. Months turned into a year. Eli grew, still small for his age but healthy and bright. His laughter filled their modest home, turning the once silent nursery into a place of joy. But it wasn't until his first birthday that Sarah learned just how strange his birth really was. Dr. Lopez invited them back to the hospital for a checkup. After the routine exams, she sat with them in her office, holding a file. "There's something I haven't told you," she began gently. "We've been studying the scans from the night Eli was born. The strangest thing isn't his size, it's how he was born." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" Dr. Lopez turned the screen toward them. It showed the moment of delivery. The ultrasound had captured something unusual, a faint glow, a pulse of light surrounding the baby's body as he entered the world. Normally, when a baby is born this early, there's trauma, oxygen loss, shock, drive. Lopez explained. But Eli's birth, it wasn't chaotic. His vitals stayed steady. It's almost as if he chose the moment himself. David shook his head slowly. "That's not possible." Dr. Lopez smiled faintly. "Maybe not by science, but maybe by something greater." Sarah felt chills. In her heart, she already knew. From the first moment she felt him move inside her, Eli had always been more than just a child born too early. He was a spark of something extraordinary, something that reminded the world that even the smallest life can carry the greatest strength. The story of Eli spread far beyond the hospital. People began sending letters from all over the country, mothers, veterans, cancer survivors, strangers who said his story gave them the courage to keep fighting. Sarah would read them aloud at night, sitting by Eli's crib. He'd giggle at the sound of her voice, his tiny hands waving in the air like he understood every word. One letter came from a woman in Texas who wrote, "When I thought my life was over, I read about Eli. I realized if he could fight to breathe, I could fight to live. Thank you for sharing him with the world." That's when Sarah understood something profound. Maybe Eli wasn't born early by accident. Maybe he came when the world needed hope the most. Years later, when Eli was 6, he stood on a stage at a hospital fundraiser beside Drive. Lopez, wearing a little blue suit and a shy smile. His voice was soft but sure as he said into the microphone, "My mom says I was born too soon, but I think I came right on time." The audience erupted in tears and applause. Sarah stood in the crowd, holding David's hand tightly. Her heart swelled with pride, not for what he'd survived, but for what he'd inspired. The world's smallest baby had grown into a living symbol of hope. And though his beginning was filled with fear, his life became a story of love stronger than science, faith deeper than fear, and humanity brighter than any light in that delivery room. Later that night, as Sarah tucked him into bed, Eli asked, "Mom, why do people say I was the smallest baby?" She smiled and brushed his hair gently. "Because you were, sweetheart. You were tiny, smaller than a doll. But your heart was bigger than the whole world." He yawned sleepily. "Did you ever think I wouldn't make it?" Sarah's eyes softened. "I was scared," she admitted. "But I never stopped believing in you." Eli smiled, eyes closing. "I didn't stop believing either." Sarah watched him drift off, the faint rise and fall of his chest a miracle she would never take for granted. She sat there in the quiet room, thinking about that night, the storm, the fear, the faint glow of life against impossible odds. The strangest thing about Eli's birth wasn't how small he was, or even how he survived. It was that, in the very moment the world expected death, he brought forth light. And that light, born from love, faith, and sheer will, still shines today, in every heart he's touched. Sometimes, the smallest beginnings hold the biggest miracles. And sometimes, the way life enters this world isn't science at all, it's grace.